Welcome to the Roundtable Consult. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Williams, and I'm joined as always by my wonderful co-host, Attorney Sonia Madison. It's been a minute since I've seen you.
It has. And I was
Yeah.
thinking, gosh, have we talked about the Democratic Convention? Have we talked about
Has it been
Kamala's
we haven't
interview?
been on since the
I
Democratic
know.
Convention?
I can't remember. It's been, like you said, it's been so long. I can't remember
It,
the
it was
last
not
time.
because I was out of town still around the Democratic Convention. I missed a good portion of it too, because I was out traveling the world and enjoying every moment of it as
Hey,
well. So
America first. No, just kidding.
I was just testing out other countries to find out where I want to go should Donald Trump win.
Should the alleged communism starts here, whatever that means.
Interesting. So, I went to Vietnam and I was able to go to the Gucci, what they call it, Gochi tunnels. And it's where basically the Viet Cong would come in. They dug tunnels under the ground and they would go underneath them and draw the GI soldiers into them. They come under tunnels and come up behind them and ambush them. They had all types of different types of traps set for GI, and I thought that their tactic was pretty unique, and it was very much fit to the terrain as well as the size of their soldiers. Generally, pretty small Asian men can fit down into these tunnels, and you couldn't have GI Americans who are substantially bigger to get down through some of these. I couldn't get down through some of the entrances into the tunnels myself. Um, but it was interesting because it made me sit and think about, why did we fight that war? And I guess it's not a new question. It's a question that was going on. Hey, even when it was ongoing, it said, should America even have been there? But the way that it's interesting when you hear different stories told by different people of the different countries. Everybody has their own perspective.
Right.
And I honestly never was a big student of the Vietnam War, but apparently the north portion of Vietnam was controlled by communism. They wanted to basically, in the inferior or the south section was more democratic, and so there was an expansion of communism from the north through the south and try to make the whole country communist. And apparently, America didn't like the whole notion of the spread of communism. And so they then got themselves involved. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people were saying, why are we even in this world, in this war? Because, we're trying to stop another country from governing itself the way that it wants to govern itself. And it made me start thinking, like, man, capitalism is that invasive. We believe that we should really impose our beliefs, our economic systems, and our governmental systems on other countries. And I said that the audacity of that when you think about it. And it made me start really wondering whether or not capitalism is connected with the root of all evil, the love of money. And
Well, it's interesting you call it capitalism. I'm like colonization. You know what I mean? I'm not even calling it capitalism because again, it reminds you of Christopher Columbus. It reminds you of, what London often did in African countries and of course in Caribbean nations. So to me, it's more like colonization than capitalism. But
yeah, it all comes down to money too, though. So it all comes down to money. If you're not going to
yeah,
colonize
money
it,
and
you
power,
don't
right?
think you're going to make money from it. But it was just an interesting experience, and I was glad that I was able to learn some things about that. But it makes me actually start realizing that the same tactics that were used decades ago, communism and the fear of communism spreading, and America has to stop communism at all costs, makes me realize, like, man, depending on who's telling the story, there were a lot of Vietnamese who actually wanted to live under their communistic belief. Right now, there's more of a socialist society, socialist republic, I think is what they call themselves. But it's, you hear it even in our election cycles now, talking about they want to turn us all into communism. Now, Kamala Harris's father was a communist. He was a Marxist. I don't know if you've heard that or
I
not.
know I have it, although
Oh,
she was raised by a mother, so I don't even know where we're going with that, but
so I do want to address this just because I did some research on it. And Kamala Harris's father, I think his name was I forgot what his first name was, Harold or something like that. But he was an economist. And one of the things that he did, he challenged the existence of capitalism, or challenged pure capitalism, saying that pure capitalism cannot exist. And of course, if you're going to critique capitalism, then you're automatically going to be labeled a Marxist. Obviously, as an academician and as an academic economist, your job is to basically critique existing systems that are and theories that are already existing. And so, of course, he studied some of Karl Marx's work. And one of the things that he really agreed with is that, and that is that capitalism as a pure system can't exist unchecked. There has to be, at some point, some interventions of government. And so there was a guy, Keynesian, whatever, who, another economist. And so I think uh, Donald Harris, that's his first name, I think. His whole position was more of a Keynesianist rather than a Marxist. But a lot of the political dialogue and rhetoric is going around now is like her father was a Marxist, and so they're now trying to convert us all to communism. He was more of a Keynesianist, and basically he was saying that at some point the government really does need to intervene because the free market can't handle everything. And the reality of it is that's what we live in right now. I mean, we just saw it in COVID-19. We saw it with the big bailouts. And that is that if the free market could correct and maintain stability of the economy, then you wouldn't need government. But the problem is that free market can't. Why? Because free market is motivated by greed, the love of money. And so free market is going to feed itself as much as it can feed without much regard to the impact that it has on the broader community. So with bailouts, with tax relief, with tax credits and things of that nature, the government then helps to stimulate the economy and help to maintain its stability. And so people who want to criticize Donald Harris for being a Marxist, well, the reality is you're living in the system that he actually advocated for right now. And you might not like the fact that the government did bailouts. You might not like the fact that they had the PPP loans, but I guarantee you probably took one of them.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point because I think people conflate a lot of things with communism. I mean, even right now when we're talking about childcare, because we saw Donald Trump get asked a question during some economic club meeting, and he could probably better articulate his answer than I can because I can't. But essentially, what is being asked, what people are asking is, hey, childcare costs are extremely high. What is it that the government will do to get those prices down? And to me, like if we're talking about government intervention, then I mean, to me, that's not communism. But I see how people will say, oh, that's communism. But again, we as a democracy, we're asking help because these childcare costs are too high. I mean, what are we balancing? But again, I just think people, and this is why history is so important. I just don't think people really know what communism means. And anytime government becomes or intervenes, they label that as communism.
Only when they want it to work for their political interests, because communism is a bad word. That's a scary word. This word that's been used since the 1920s, within particularly white American societies. The whole notion of communism is, I mean, in a lot of Black African cultures, everything was communal anyhow. The whole notion that it takes a village and we are one communal body. Now, granted, communism is a little bit more than that, meaning that the government really takes
The
care of.
government is essentially taking everyone's resources and dabbling it out. I mean, that is extremely
Right.
different than,
Right.
hey, you have the autonomy to go to get the job you want, determine your income, negotiate all this. Again, I mean, people
But
really.
think about it. If the threat of communism was sufficient to initiate a war, and there were many Americans who actually supported the Vietnamese War, and which they call the American War. But if that's what if it were sufficient to get enough people to support it, then it's the boogeyman of communism. We have to stop that boogeyman from ever coming and swiping away what we enjoy as American citizens. And so it's been an effective tactic that has been used for well over a century now in political discourse. In order to get people to vote a certain kind of way, you tell them they all want to become communists. And it's a tired, old tactic, but apparently it still works for a lot of people because of ignorance, I guess.
Well, again, if we're going to remove the books out of the schools,
That's how you
and
maintain ignorance.
right, I mean, what we definitely have to address with somberness, the shooting that happened here in Georgia, and just so it's clear, it was not here in Atlanta, it was in Windsor, Georgia. But they did have to be, some of the victims had to be flown into Atlanta here at Grady, which is another conversation of itself for treatment because there are not a lot of trauma centers outside of the city. But I mean, to me, that's one of those conversations immediately when that happened. Of course, a lot of people are like, this is why assault weapons need to be banned. This is why there needs to be stricter background checks. And I will say here in Georgia, there are no red flag laws, which I hope changes, because if it is true that a year prior, the FBI was on notice about this and did not red flag it. So to ensure not only that there was either removal of guns in the house, but also, perhaps intervention happening then so that we can take some preventive measures, then that should be something that gets discussed versus what Governor Kemp wants to do. And that's just say, hey, just thoughts and prayers and thanks the people that responded. But it is such a tragedy. And I do commend the first responders and the police officers that were able to remove the gun and de-escalate the situation. But hopefully there is some reform following.
Yeah. So interesting. So the shooter was 14 years old. Is he going to be tried as an adult?
He is, and I don't agree with that. And I know that's probably a bad position to take. But I
Why?
mean,
Because he's white?
no, right.
What? A white person is being tried as an adult? Go figure
How dare
that. A
they?
white teenager.
Well, but again, I mean, if we're following the law, which is often based on a lot of things that are professionals that have come in, if the psychology of children has not formed, then there's no difference here. And if there are a lot of extenuating circumstances in which he did not understand or appreciate the actions, I think that needs to be considered. Now, his father is being tried. But he's not being tried for murder. I think it's more so second degree murder and involuntary.
Voluntary manslaughter, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I do think that's a separate conversation as to whether he should be tried. He definitely should be punished. I don't think he should be tried as an adult, but I understand here in Georgia, since you're not going to take away the guns, we're going to give the harshest penalty we can for this type of action.
13 years old is the minimum age, I think. That blew my mind that in Georgia, as young as 13 years old, you can be tried as an adult for certain very violent crimes, which I don't know how I feel about that, frankly, but it really does place a whole lot of burden on children to be like, I don't know, maybe it places a bigger burden on parents to parent your children. Because
then the penalty should be strict on the parent. If that's what the goal is, then the penalty should be strict on the parent and not the child, right?
I guess so. I mean, these are questions. There are so many questions now that are coming up in our society because, and I was writing this just the other day. I said, problem is that we know we can do some things long before we realize whether or not we should do things. And so I think society is advancing so quickly that it's hard for us, and we're dealing with problems that we hadn't had to deal with in the past. And current things happen a lot faster than we know how to deal with them. So the ethics always trail behind certain things. It was like somebody was talking about, I saw something earlier about how they use vaccines and they were genetically modifying the coronavirus back in the 1960s and 70s and intentionally infected, several people across different lands just to see what happened.
Huh? What is this?
Yeah, but the reality is, I mean, except it was for white people that they did it too as well. But the point is that we find out that we can do certain things, and then our ethics lag behind it. We don't know if this is what we should be doing. Yes, you can try a teenager as an adult, but the question is, should you do it? And our 13 or 14-year-olds today a little bit more developed and understanding, they have access to more information than we may have had back then and there when we were growing up. You and I, our generation.
Well, and again, access to information doesn't necessarily mean you're more intelligent or more equipped. I mean, I think it's clear that we are removing certain information. Again, if you're removing history and out of the book, out of lessons, then you're removing certain information and replacing it a lot with conspiracy theories, propaganda, and we see oftentimes legislators talk about, hey, there should be a certain age for social media, there should be a certain age for certain movies or certain whatever. So you can't, and that's why it just becomes an oxymoron. You can't say on the one hand, hey, they're not developed enough to handle this type of information or to process this type of information, but then you, on the other hand, say, well, you should be old enough to appreciate certain consequences, and we try you as an adult because you should have that adult mentality.
But you do agree with parents being punished sometimes
Punished.
for the
Although
actions of their children.
especially in this case, I mean,
Yeah.
you knew a year in advance and probably well before that, that there was an issue here. And there's a lot more information coming out because there are certain family members, and this is all allegations. So I want to make sure it's clear. It's not taken as true, but there have been allegations that he suffered from abuse and by the hands of his father, and that and so that can be some factors too, as to why he sees or feels the way he does about certain things. And not being able to process. I mean, some people will conflate abuse with love, and so, there's still a lot more information coming out about the situation, but I just do not think that a 14-year-old has the same expectations, understanding, and appreciation of their actions as someone 21 or over. I just don't think that.
Yeah, and that's probably true. There is that, especially with the amount of influences that they get in terms of social media and things on the internet. So the question is where does the line get drawn? Yeah, so the 14-year-old is no longer just responsible for his own actions. His parents become responsible for his actions as well. When at some point is social media going to be responsible as well? Do you foresee that happening sometime in the future where you're saying, hey, those things really do uh, they affect how you're socialized? Social media is drastically impacting how we are socialized, particularly our young formative children and things that they see on television. And I know for a while they were talking about, way back in the early 90s, they were talking about gangster rap and things of that nature. And you should put
Oh,
warning
don't we
labels
long
on
for those
those.
days, right, man?
You're right. It was the worst thing we had was gangster rap.
It's interesting that you posed that because I mean, we saw what was like just a year ago. Donald Trump was saying, "Hey, ban TikTok," and now, well, maybe we shouldn't ban TikTok. And so it kind of depends on which way the wind blows as to how you see social media. And we recently heard Mark Zuckerberg claim that he wished that he had not, I guess, removed certain information back in 2020 related to certain information that was being presented. And so, and to some degree, you see Congress trying to make sure there are certain protocols. And I do agree with, right, you may see now a lot of community notes that are on social media, or a lot of instances where people do say in real time, hey, this is not true, or this is a conspiracy theory, or they try to rebut a lot of the stuff. But again, as we talked about, the certain information is louder than the truth or than
Yeah.
the facts. And as you mentioned with your tour in Vietnam, depending on the perspective, will determine which truth is the reality, right?
Yeah.
And
That's
so,
why in my book I have a whole chapter called "The Extinction of Truth,"
yeah.
and it all boils down to the information, how we receive information. When you think about it, let's go back to even before the printing press was there. Most information was handed down by oral tradition. A lot of people couldn't read necessarily, and maybe there were some things that were handwritten, but it was not widely disseminated, right? But then come the printing press, and you start saying, okay, with the printing press, now you can disseminate this information to a whole bunch of people at one time. But unfortunately, if everybody can't read, then there's still some limitation. But then when people start being able to read, the audience just keeps growing and growing and growing. And now we've got the internet and social media where information is disseminated in a matter of minutes, around the world is disseminated in a matter of minutes. And the problem is that anytime you have information, there need to be gatekeepers of information and some arbiters of truth. But who become the arbiter? Who's designated that person? And unfortunately, these social media companies have a lot of power, but they're like, we don't know how best to handle this power, because if we post something as conspiracy theory and we have no way of verifying that it is actually conspiratorial, it could actually be true. And then we get accused of, censoring and squashing the truth for another political motive. Then on the other side, people are saying you're allowing poison to go out into the system. Problem is that technology is advancing much more quickly than our ethics can, than our morality can develop and keep up with it. It just can't happen. And so, where does the line draw? At some point, we're going to say, yes, we understand the negative impact that social media is having on our children and on their psychological development. Maybe it's saying, maybe at the age of 18, it's no longer able to really say, hey, a person of 18 can be accountable for his or her action. I'm speaking hypothetically right now. But until we really know the true impact of social media and this wide swath of information and broad access to it, we don't know what the psychological impact is going to have in the long run. And eventually, I do believe that some of these companies will wind up being held liable for
But
it.
now, Dr. Williams, don't you think we do know the impact? Because, I mean, and one of the things that I don't like, and I really do think needs to be addressed, is this algorithm thing where, again, once they realize the information that you're going to gravitate towards, they continue to spew that information out to you, which makes it very difficult for you to know the other side or to formulate a truth, because now you're just being fed what they feel you want to hear. But we see so many times people, particularly young people, we see suicide rates are going up. We see mental health issues are going up. I mean, even in this election, we see the division that is happening and people using this information to spark even more hate. So I think we see the psychological effects that are happening based on the social media, issues that are compounding. I just think that for so many people, this free speech argument becomes so much more that they want to grasp onto. They want to be able to say what they want to say without having any consequence, whether it is true or not. And I think that's also part of the problem as well.
Yeah, it is. And I think it goes back to the original sin. And I talk about this in the book too. I think it comes back to the original sin. It's always a quest for information, quest to know something that you never were intended to know. Information, basically. I think information is an invention of humanity, but it's also going to be where humanity is consumed by its own invention. And if you think about it, when God created Adam and Eve, he said, hey, you can eat of everything that he created. He said was good, right? He said he created the birds in the air and the fowl, I mean, the everything that creeped on the land. And then afterwards he said, and it's good. And I think God really only wanted us to know good, because when he gave man, Adam and Eve, instruction, he said, you can eat from every tree in here except one tree. And that was from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Well, they already knew good because God introduced them to good, right? So what God never intended for us to know was evil. But we have an insatiable thirst or quest in us to be able to have more information and to know everything that God knows. We want to be like God. And that's how they were tempted. He said, God didn't say, God knows that the minute that you eat from this tree, you'll be like him. You'll have more information. You'll have all the information that he has to be able to discern good and evil. I don't think God ever intended for us to be able to know evil, but we have such an insatiable thirst for more information, and that thirst is what's going to wind up consuming us.
And I'm glad you said that, because I know how you love to blame Eve. But it's nice to hear
It
that
was her. She was
you
the one that was more
realize,
susceptible to it, but
it's nice to hear that you realize it was Adam's insatiable need to be God
no,
that got us to
no. He
this.
didn't again, he didn't tempt Adam like that. He tempted Eve like that. He's like, did he not say? And Adam just was a sucker for a woman. and we still are suckers for women, men are. So
Well, I don't even know if that's true anymore.
yeah, we're suckers for women because we wind up doing a whole bunch of things for, which brings
Well,
us
in
to
that
our
case, Kamala Harris, can we already call her president? Or
no, we're sucker for a woman that we can have who speaks to us at some point. You know, we give up a whole bunch of things for a woman, and which brings us to the topic today is really our prioritized relationships because now I will say that sometimes, you know, like you do give up a lot of things for men do give up a lot sometimes for women. But I wonder if that's changing though. I wonder if some of those things are changing. I remember when I had started dating Doris. I had a very
gosh,
good
you still
friend.
remember? I'm
Yes,
just
of course. Of course. I still date her. I still date her. But I had a very good friend who was a female friend of mine. And this friend was there with me during some very challenging times when my father and brother died in a boating accident. And this friendship was very important to me. And so we started dating. And I wondered at some point, you know, even though this other friend and I were platonic at the time, and so and Doris and I were committed to each other, and like how do you then manage developing a new relationship when you have an old valuable relationship that is present, and you don't want to just discard that old valuable relationship for a new relationship that has an uncertain promise
Well, I
for its
hate that we use
persistence.
the word discard because I don't think it has to be that extreme. I mean, it definitely becomes of a less priority. But I guess I imagine the first question would be, what is your intention with your relationship? I guess in your example with Doris, because if we see one as this is going to be my partner, the mother of my children, I mean that person then carries a lot more significance than, oh, this is my platonic friend who, I mean, again, I'm not saying you discard, I don't like discarding any relationships, but you can't put it on the same higher plane, right?
Why can't you? Because the reality is, if this first person who had been with you, let's say friend A has been with you for years. You all have been close friends. They have gone through. I think the relationships develop their significance based off of what you've experienced together, and usually the hardships in
I'm
relationships
not
when
based
you
on your
go.
intent for that relationship. You just think it's all about the experience.
You can have certain expectations, but those expectations aren't proven until you've gone through some things.
Yeah, but
Because
if you have those, if you have an intent, to me, you still got to be intentional in walking into what you intend for that relationship versus, well, we'll just see if she can prove herself. And
yeah,
or therefore we have a good experience.
you have to prove yourself. I can have an
So
expectation
you
until
have to prove yourself. Okay.
yes, if you don't meet that expectation at some point, then I'm like, then I made a lot of sacrifice off of an expectation that
But at
never
least you've
really
made the
manifested.
sacrifice. But in making the sacrifice, you have some intentionality. I'm talking about those that will not make a sacrifice until this other person proves himself. So I'm saying, hey, we both should be sacrificing and we both should have an intentionality here. And if you're not vulnerable, it will be hard for you to have these experiences with this person because you have a guard, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I don't know that I believe it. I have another friend, and I have another friend of mine who once dated this other woman, and the woman they broke up, but they were really good. Excuse me, they were really good friends, and this other woman just got married. And I told my friend, I said, "Hey, that relationship's going to change as much
It's gonna change. It's gonna change.
as
I'm glad
much
you didn't say
as
you got to discard it, but it is definitely going to
it's
change.
basically essentially it was discarded. It essentially was discarded because the relationship, I mean, is devalued because it doesn't carry the same significance that it had before. And anytime your relationship is diminished in value, your importance to this person is diminished. That's a hard thing to have to deal with. To realize that now, you know, I was everything to this person, or at least, you know, I meant a whole
That
lot to this
wasn't the
person.
case.
Not everything. That's an exaggeration still. But the point is that you meant a lot more to that person. And now that person, you barely hear from that person, you barely see that person barely talks to you or anything like that. Those things can become difficult to really even manage because like what happened? It's almost in some degree like a divorce, especially if you had a strong, intimate, and I'm not talking about physically intimate, I'm talking about psychologically and emotionally intimate relationship with a person, and you guys have been there for each other. Now all of a sudden you've got a new person that comes in, and that person has consumed all of the other your friends' energy, and you're left here looking like, what am I supposed to do? How do I navigate this?
Well, I mean, and it's definitely true what Paul says in terms of, he would better you not to marry because it will distract you from your worship. But I would hope that, and maybe this is again for what we're posing to the group, is I would hope that to some degree, if even your friend, if they know that it is your desire or your priority to be in a certain type of relationship, whether that is marriage or partnership, because to me, the same can happen if you have a new business partner. I would imagine that business partner is going to carry a lot more significance than your friend. And you're probably going to be a lot more intimate in that. And again, not intimate in sex, but just intimate in sharing of your life and sharing of your thoughts and sharing of even your investment because now the both are tied, then the friend who is again emotionally there for you but at the same time doesn't have the same sacrifice or investment in you as your partner will. But if your friend understands that that is your desire, I would hope that even when we talked about earlier, even the expectations are managed accordingly so that there is no, I guess, distraction or is no prevention of you prioritizing that partnership over that friendship.
Yeah, but what happens when that partnership breaks down or that marriage ends in
I mean,
divorce?
we've
And
had
then
the
you got
divorce
your friend
conversation. It's hard,
who you
right?
neglected now, this friend
But
who
you
had
can't
been with you for
neglect.
20
And
years.
that's why I don't like discard, because I don't agree that you discard a person. And if that
Okay, diminish.
and so if there's no discarding, then there's no neglect.
But
Uh,
there's some diminishment.
there's some
Is
diminishment.
there no neglect and diminish?
But now, even in that, okay, say you go through a divorce, because I'd imagine your friend isn't just sitting on the corner waiting on you, and their your life is their
Right.
life. Like,
Right.
so I'd imagine they're having to deal with other things as well. And so, when they have the time, I'd imagine they would help. But I also imagine there is some understanding on your part that, hey, they're not going to stop what they're doing just because you're going through a hard time.
Right. But those relationships change. I guess you have to realize they say some
But they
relationships are
should,
there
right?
for a
They should
season,
change.
reason, and a lifetime. So you have to determine if that relationship is just for a season, reason, or a lifetime. And
But I guess the key question really is about those relationships that should be prioritized. And I guess maybe that is the question that we're posing, is whether or not certain relationships should be prioritized over the other. And I would even pose from my standpoint, like your marital relationship or even your co-parenting relationship should be prioritized over your relationship with your children. And I mean, I'm sure I don't have kids, so and I will make sure that everyone understands I do not have children. I'm sure if I had children, maybe I would change in that. But I would also imagine, and this is coming a little bit off the Cam Newton podcast with Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, but some of that is, I'd imagine the psychology of a child is needing some type of security and stability, and they will look to their parents' relationship for that and not looking to money or not looking to, okay, are you at every single thing that I do, but looking, okay, there's stability here, I know I can come home here, and that no matter what, there is this unit in which we are all then being able to pour into or receiving the residual of the love of the parents.
parents, you say parents, you're making a presumption that it's a father and mother in the house or two parents in the
Well, that's
house.
why I said co-parenting or marital, because I
Yeah.
do understand, yeah, there sometimes divorce happen, but and maybe again, this is part of that legal hat and again, someone who doesn't have children and never been married and never done the divorce. But in seeing a lot of situations where a lot of my friends are dealing with co-parenting situations and the difficulty in that, and one parent maybe not, being as involved as the other, I would imagine getting that co-parenting situation together should be more of a priority than saying, well, I'm gonna just forget about the other person and make sure that I am at every school event.
You're saying co-parenting and prioritizing the relationship with the other parent,
Yeah,
meaning that and making sure that that
prioritizing that
relationship
co-parenting
is.
relationship. Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough one
I
sometimes,
know, I know. That's
especially
what I
when you
said.
go through,
I know it
especially
might
when
be
you go
some
through
disagreement.
divorce. That's a tough one. I mean, I don't know if I can prioritize that one when especially depending on the nature of the divorce, especially when there's
Hey, if it
very
was easy, everybody do it, right?
I don't know about that, but yeah, that's a challenge because yes, there are some benefits. There may be some benefits and prioritizing that relationship, but after we're
There
divorced,
may be some benefits, or there
yeah,
is benefits.
I
There's
don't
no
know.
may. There is
There may be.
benefits.
I don't know that if I'm divorced, that it's necessary for me to prioritize my relationship with my ex-wife
The
for the
prioritize
sake
the
of my
co-parenting
children.
relationship. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that you make sure that that person, has alimony, but I am saying making sure that person again, prioritizing the co-parenting relationship. Because to me, then if you say, well, I don't care about that, then not only are you diminishing the importance of that person in your child's life, but I
It's
think
diminishing their importance in my life.
but can you distinguish that? Mean that they will still remain in your life so long as you have this child,
Eh,
right?
Arm's
I
length.
mean, at least that's what the courts say. Yes.
Arm's length is fine. I don't have to prioritize anybody at arm's length. Take the
um,
Heisman.
but I guess I'm also like, and maybe we bring in the religion, the Christian aspect, but I'm also like, okay, what is the difference here in you prioritizing your wife, and prioritizing the co-parenting relationship?
Prioritizing my wife and the
Yeah, and
co-parent.
versus prioritizing. I mean, because to me, one of the reasons you're prioritizing your wife is because of the unit of the family, right?
Yeah,
Okay, well
no
that family
part of
unit
it.
doesn't go away just because you decide to get a divorce.
So part of it is going to part of prioritizing that relationship with my wife is the benefit that it provides for me as well.
The
And
family unit, right? I mean,
huh?
your family.
Right. I mean, if I'm not deriving benefit, personal benefit from a relationship, I'm probably not going to
You have children.
prioritize it.
That's personal. You have children here. That's personal.
That's true. That is personal, but my question is how much do my children need to see me prioritizing the relationship with my ex-wife who happens to be their mother? I don't know that they need to that needs to be a high priority. They need to be my priority. My children will need to have a high priority in my life. But to be like, hey, your mom wants me. No, I'm not doing that.
And
First of
that's
all, that
going
would
back
interfere with any
to
future relationships because if I started dating
hey, future,
somebody
it will
else,
be tough. I mean, but
yeah,
that's going to be tough anyways. Your future relationships after your divorce will be tough because, again, you can't
I'm
remove
not
the
getting
fact
divorced.
that there is a
First off,
co-parenting situation happening here. Now
my
that
wife
I
was
can speak
watching,
on.
honey, I'm not getting divorced. I'm not
That's
looking
it.
for
Now that I
anybody
can
else.
speak.
Sonya's bringing this whole conversation up, and I have no idea why she's talking about this. I love
And
you,
Doris was like, I agree with Sonia because because I remain your priority whether we stay married or not.
if the court forces you to be a priority for me, yeah.
But I mean, one of the things that was talked about in the podcast was how when you focus on the children, you say, oh, no, my children's priority is you don't teach the children not only to respect authority, not only the fact that, hey, life doesn't revolve around you, but you also don't teach them about relationships. And I do think it would be good for your child to see you prioritizing that co-parenting relationship, because that will help them as they continue to grow older and realize what are priorities in life.
Yeah. Kamala Harris and her husband and his ex-wife, I think they seem to demonstrate that pretty well. Doug Emhoff and his ex-wife have a what appears to be, or at least what is reported to be, a very congenial relationship. And then when Kamala came into it, she recognized the value, at least his ex-wife recognized the value of maintaining a collegial or a congenial relationship with the new woman in their lives. And That's a tough one,
That is
especially when you
tough.
start saying, "Hey, you're going to be in there with my children, and you want my children to start calling you Mama Law?"
And she probably didn't say all that, but I imagine it would be easier for the new person coming in because hey, no, this is how it's structured. We're not compromising how it's structured. We have said it. Everyone is secure in that structure, and that way you either come in accepting the structure, or you go find someone else so you don't have to deal with the structure that you don't want for your family. But I
Yeah,
think that makes it easier.
everybody says that they're secure in that structure until it's challenged. You
Right.
know,
But if when it's challenged, the foundation remains.
it
Because
is.
it's not going to get challenged just once. It will be challenged every time your child goes through puberty, every time your child goes through a new situation, every time your child has a bad grade. I mean, I'd imagine the challenges of that structure is going to happen well before that new person comes in.
Hmm. So I have some friends who are single fathers, and one of the things that they believe they need to do is they need to prioritize their relationship with their children more than they prioritize any other romantic relationships that they're getting into. So they'll say, "Hey, I'm not even going to bring women. I don't bring women around my children," is what they say, just because these children have to be my priority now because I'm a single father and I just don't have. I need to make sure that my children are well taken care of. I can't be bringing some crazy woman in here. She acting fool
But they're all crazy.
well, he just said not all of them. He just can't take the chance of bringing a crazy one in there who gets him to eat a fruit that he shouldn't be eating. And but the point is, and then the whole world goes to seeing it that after that. So you really do have to guard yourself about what women you let in your life.
I mean, I'm not disputing that, but I agree then if your friends are saying, "Hey, I'm going to prioritize my child over any future romantic relationship," then make that known so that to me, as someone who doesn't have children but has dated men with children, if I know from the beginning, listen, my child would always be the priority over you, I'm not likely to enter in that relationship because
But do
that's
you
not
think?
the ideology that I believe.
See, I don't necessarily believe that that's the case because any relationship that you go into where there are pre-existing relationships, you can always have the presumption that that person is always the pre-existing relationship is always going to be prioritized over you. You have to take some time to prove that
To prove, look at
that
the prove word.
yeah, to prove. And there's nothing wrong with proving. There's nothing wrong with proving your love. God Himself said, "Prove me now and see if I will not pour out a blessing." So if God
But
can be
God also
proved,
said the second most commandment is to love everyone.
I love everybody. I just don't
It
love
didn't say
everybody the same.
prove first, then love.
I listen. You have to be proved. Every relationship needs to be proved, and it's not me sitting around waiting
Look
like,
at
okay, go on
family
ahead, prove it to
relationships.
me. It's not.
Family relationships have to they have to prove
Yes,
something to you,
they
Dr.
have to
Williams,
be
before we
proven.
could.
And when I say proven, I'm talking about they have to go. You have to go through something, and then once you've gone through something, I know that I can depend on you. I know that you're not going to flake off on me and run away at the first sign of trouble. And it's not me sitting around saying, "Okay, I'm checking off a list here or there." And how long was the proving process? The proving process sometimes can be weeks, sometimes it can be years. It depends on what goes on in your life at some point. If you're just around, if you happen to come around and everything's been sunshine and daisies and lilies and roses, everything, then yeah, that's good. I don't know how you are when we go through the storm, and if I can depend on you. But once if you came around and you were there immediately, we went through a storm, and you still proved that, hey, I'm not leaving you. I'm here. I'm like, you proved yourself very quickly. And so unfortunately, there's no timeline on what that proving is. And so yeah, so don't I wouldn't say if you tell me that your children are always going to be prioritized over me, then I'm not getting to that. No, prove yourself. What'll happen?
I said, what you've already said always will be my priority. And so then to me, on top, then our foundation, I'm understanding, and I think that's what happens a lot with women, and I think men just don't understand this. if I'm asking you, hey, what does the leadership of our family look like? And you say, well, the children will always be the priority. And I know that
Yeah.
that's not the leadership I want for my family. Then it would be behooved on me. I mean, it'd be smart of me to say, okay, well, we could be friends, but this isn't the family unit that I desire or that I want to be led by.
Yeah,
Now,
I
it's
don't
different
think.
if you say, like, right now, my children are the priority. I'm open to a relationship, and as we continue to talk and grow and whatever, then if there's a shift, and you say from the beginning, listen, if I ever marry, of course, that wife becomes my priority. That's a different conversation. But if you're just off top telling me, no matter what status you are in my life, the children will come first, I need to do something with the honesty of that information. And if that doesn't align with what I believe to be the family unit, I don't ignore that in hopes that, well, maybe I prove myself and eventually he will see how wonderful I am and prioritize
He
me.
won't. He won't. Trust me. You're like,
I mean, I'm
ooh,
not
dodge the
telling
bullet with
women,
that one.
I would never tell a woman to do that. Like, oh, just hope that, you go prove yourself to him and he will see the light. I would not tell someone to do that.
Now you said something a mouthful. You said the honesty of that statement. And what you have to really find out, what is the real honesty of that statement? And a lot of times when people say things, when they use extreme terms like always and never and things of that nature, nothing always happens, nothing never happens. And so usually when somebody are using extreme words like that, very definitive words like that, it's usually, I think, uh some backstory to that,
Oh,
meaning
I don't
that
doubt
they
it.
are
You're divorced.
it,
You
right,
have,
right.
I
No,
mean, and I'd imagine
I
there's a
hear I hear you, but
reason.
it's usually an exaggeration at that point. But it's something that they need to use that exaggeration in order to help keep them in the place where they are and help them to navigate what they're getting through. Usually, I would imagine if somebody said, "My children are always going to be the priority for me," and I'm never gonna. That's probably somebody who just came out of a bad relationship and who is saying, I've been burned by trusting somebody like this in the past, and I'm not going to put anybody else like that. And so, if that kind of language scares somebody off, then they've already proven to me that they're not the one for me. And
Well,
so,
fine. And you've already proven to them that you're not either, because to me, what I'm hearing is you have some healing to do.
that's probably
And
true.
perhaps you're not ready for a committed relationship. You're not ready for the type of relationship that maybe I would want. And so in that vein, because I feel like you're making her look bad because she says, okay, I hear that and I respect that. And so based on that, I don't want to then go into this whole romantic relationship with you. I'm not faulting her for saying that. And I think you're faulting her for saying that. But what I am hearing you say is, hey, this person is broken. And so then, yes, you need to go handle that brokenness, because that's, if we're also being honest, a relationship doesn't end because one person is horrible. I'd imagine some reason it ends is because you probably should not have entered that relationship to begin with. You probably ignored some signs, but you were so maybe elated with lust or elated with what you wanted that you entered that relationship. And so there's probably never any personal accountability that you're taking in that either. But again, to suggest that, oh well, she didn't prove herself anyway, she ate for me anyways. Well, no, you didn't create this space to be honest and vulnerable about your situation. You decided to have these extreme views, and she took what you said and moved on.
But you know what else is an extreme view? The belief that you can come into my relationship right now and displace or diminish the significance of another relationship, especially that of my child. And so if you come into this relationship with the expectation that someday you're going to displace my children in terms of the level of affection that you have, that's a little bit unrealistic expectation right there too. Uh,
Well,
and if you
and
expect
again,
me
for
to say,
you, it may be. From my perspective, I don't think so. Because again, to me, it's wrong for you to go in and say, right now, I need to be first. I agree with that 100%. But it's also wrong for you to go in and think, oh, I'm going to date this potential. Maybe I will convince him to see that I am proven to be this first person. And I'm
Earn
saying no,
it.
both people need to have an ideology here.
Earn it. That's what I say. Earn it. Earn it. And the
But
reality of,
then again, say it on both parts. Because to me, if a guy is saying, well, my kids will always be first, you're putting it on this girl to earn it. No, both people are supposed to be in your, and to me, in your earning each other. And so then you either don't come in with these extreme views and say, hey, right now, I'm just looking for friendship, or right now, I think you're a great person. I'd like to just see where this goes. That to me is more able for both people to quote unquote earn it, because I hate that. But to me, to grow and see where this goes versus saying, hey, just so you know, you will never be a priority over my children. And you need to earn even a priority on the list of the scale that will still be below my children.
so somebody should just love you and sacrifice for you just because you're you. Just because
First
you're
of all,
Sonya. Just because you're Sonya. Is that your expectation?
By Christian views, we are to be servants. So yes, you are to serve and love others, the
I can
sacrifice
serve you
of
without
yourself. But
sacrificing
I'm
for you.
also saying, and when we're going into the relationship, because I see you like to do these extremes, and I'm saying there should not be an extreme. It shouldn't be either you're all in for me or you're not in for me. I'm saying there needs to be an openness, but there also needs to be, to me, what I think women want for men is, I need to know where your ideology is. I need to know how you want to lead your family structure. And if you're telling me that it is your ideology that the children come first in our family, then yes, as a woman, for someone who does not agree with that ideology, I am not going to enter into that relationship. But now, if you tell me, no, my ideology is this, now you're not going to be this in dating, but this is our ideology in our marriage and in our family, then that is at least creating a space for us to get to know each other, because we have the foundation of what our ideology is.
Ideology changes too. Ideology evolves. And why do ideology evolves? Necessity. And necessity causes an ideology. So yes, I used to believe this way. This is the way that I used to be. But I found something that says this me being able to obtain this is not consistent with me being able to maintain my the ideologies that I currently have. And so my ideologies are malleable. Most people's ideologies are malleable. People start off saying, "Oh, I would never do this. I would never do that," and then you find yourself doing stuff that you said you would never do. Why? Because you are now in love with somebody, because that person has now captured and proven their worth. They earned the sacrifice that you would want to make for them. You're like, man, I never thought that I would have been doing this, and here I am acting a fool in this situation, doing the very thing that I said I never do. And that's just because love changes things. The value of that relationship changes some things. And you don't come into a relationship with that level of value. You earn that level of value. And when you have earned that level of value, the level of sacrifice becomes commensurate with it. Otherwise, you're like, listen, you're going to lose it. And then you say, okay, well, I don't want to lose it. So let me make this sacrifice in this way in order to help cultivate and keep this relationship going the way that it's going to do. I just don't, I believe that some people have some pretty rigid ideology. And yeah, you should believe what they say. But by the same token, you should also take what they say in context of what's going on all around it, because most people are not in touch enough with their psyche and or their current state to be able to fully articulate, hey, I'm just going through some things right now, and I understand that this might evolve over time, but right now I'm really frustrated with the relationship that I just got out of. And so, and the last 3 or 4 that I've gotten into have had this type of damaging impact on my children. So my children have to be a priority for now. But as our relationship grows, I can see you gradually becoming more and more important and consuming more of my attention and affection. Men don't articulate like that.
You have to be honest about whether you're ready for a relationship in that. Because to me, if you're in your mind saying, hey, I am still struggling with this previous relationship and I'm still trying to mend the brokenness that happened in that previous relationship, I don't think you're ready to enter into a new relationship. Because the one thing I think we both agree on is, hey, both parties are going to have to work. And if you are not ready to put in the work for this new relationship because you are still trying to process and understand why the other one didn't work, as well as trying to help your children process and understand why that relationship didn't work, I don't think you have the facility or the capacity to put in the work to prove yourself in this new relationship. So then you shouldn't enter into this new relationship.
I don't think you fully process a failed prior relationship until you're into a new relationship sometimes. Because the reality is that, you find yourself in the same situation, the same challenge. You're like, hey, this is familiar to me. Why do I keep coming into this same situation? I don't know that you get a full understanding of what happened in the prior failed relationship until you're later on and you start realizing, okay, certain things need to change. Because you can only just hypothesize about what potentially happened until you're in that situation again. You don't know if you've actually resolved what that issue was there before.
Well, and that may be true, but to me, at least, either you are going into this new relationship saying, all right, I am open, I'm going to put in the work because I want this marriage or I want this family structure here, or you're going into it and saying, hey, listen, just so we're clear, I'm still broken over here. And so you're not going to be a priority and my children are a priority. So you just need to know that going in. To me, those are two different mentalities going into the next relationship.
Yeah, but when you articulate that immediately puts somebody's off. I mean, who's going to, hey, you're not going to be a priority coming into this.
As it should. I mean, if one person is like, I am prioritizing, my relationship here because I want to be married, I want to do this. And the other person is like, yeah, I hear you, but I'm not doing that. Then we're not on the same page. I mean, it would I get I hear all the time. Sometimes, yeah, women sometimes date potential. I'm not encouraging you dating someone knowing that they are not where you are and hoping that they will change.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. There's some truth to it. But by the same token, I don't want people to get discouraged by the assertion that somebody say, "Hey, you're not that big of a priority for me right now." And whether they say it outrightly like that, or if they say that, or if they say it with their actions, because that's what happens sometimes. Is you're being told you're not that big of a priority for me right now. Doesn't mean that you won't become that. In fact, I actually had that conversation with my wife before. I was like, this person is there. I have every expectation that as our relationship grows, the significance of your relationship with me is going to exceed the significance of that person. But we're not there right now. We're just starting to date. And I don't know if that's going to be 3 months or if that's going to be 3 years. But at some point, if you're patient, what eventually happen, if you're patient and if you're worth it, then what will eventually happen is that your level of priority will gradually rise. And the question is will you find that you're worth it, and will you prove that you're worth it? My wife did.
If only one person is proven and the other person is like, I'm waiting around for you to prove yourself.
Now, both of you prove it.
I don't think that that's right.
No. Both of you are proving. I mean, the reality is when you're in a relationship, both of you are proving your worth to that relationship. And if you don't prove your worth to that relationship, guess what? That relationship is going to eventually die off.
But at least we're on the same page that both of them are proving their worth. And
yeah, absolutely.
But that's why I'm also saying if one is saying, hey, listen, I'm still struggling over here and I got these kids, I'm still prioritizing over here. And whereas the other person doesn't have kids, doesn't have to go through a bad divorce.
Yeah, that's
the ability for one versus the other, it can be frustrating. And to some degree, I think that's why a lot of times people do say, well, I don't want to date someone who has kids, because there is that understanding that I
Yeah,
am making a much bigger sacrifice
right.
than you are.
And you say I'm not willing to play second. Some people just aren't willing to play second fiddle to
Well,
anybody.
marriage is hard. I'd imagine I don't want to play second fiddle either in marriage because
I
it's
mean,
just
even
too
if it's for a
hard.
short period of time. So the reality is, yeah, if you got other relationships significant, you can go ahead and say, hey, listen, if you got anybody else in your life that's significant, that I would be playing second fiddle to, we don't even need to begin this relationship. That's one approach. You can do that. But the other person is say, hey, if I think this person is really worth it, I'm okay. And I believe that when they see who I am, they'll know that I'm worth making sacrifice for it. Then, you say, okay, we'll see how this plays out, and not necessarily dismiss it from the beginning. Because sometimes if you dismiss it, if Doris had dismissed our relationship early on,
Oh, she'd be in
we
such a
never,
better place, wouldn't she? I'm
huh?
just kidding.
Now, 31 years later,
I was
she's
like, I know
I'm
that's
sure,
where you're going.
I'm sure she's pretty happy now that she's like, you know what? It was an uncomfortable position to be in, and it was an uncomfortable thing to hear or to acknowledge before. But reality is that, if you were really worth it, then that person is going to gradually start saying, hey, listen, as significant as this other relationship was and is to me right now, you're proven to be much more significant to that, and you're growing in value to me every day. And the problem is that most people, one, don't want to hear that you're not that significant to me right now, and two, they don't want to hear that you're growing in significance. They want to start off and be the all encompassing significant other. And no, you can't be that way. You still have to earn.
Well, again, and I'm saying no one wants to hear you will never be my priority over my kids. I will always prioritize my kids.
Yeah,
And to me, if that is your truth, then I'm saying you gotta respect the other person that says, okay, well, that's not the relationship that I want. But now if you're saying right now, this is my priority, then I would also encourage you not to manipulate or mislead the other person into a relationship in which you are not ready for or you cannot give them.
right. Fair
And I
enough.
think that's part of the problem too. And even going with Cam, listening to the one of the baby mothers, I mean, she probably took your stance. He was probably like, listen, I'm more scared of divorce than I am for marriage, but I will prioritize you in this relationship. And now here we are 3 or 4 kids later, and they separate. And so that's why I'm saying sometimes you also have to take what the other person says and believe them versus, well, I hear you, but perhaps that's just the broken
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I would say have a more in-depth discussion about where they really are. Because what somebody says when the first thing that comes out of their mouth usually isn't necessarily where they really are in the deeper levels. Take some time to really find out, is this something that they really believe in, or if it's something that's right now hurt or some other reason or fear or whatever it is this causing them to say that. And I wouldn't take it at face value initially, but have some more in-depth discussion about it, explore, and then find out. But don't get in too deep until you really know.
Well, hopefully, people are commenting and giving us their thoughts on today's topic. We love hearing what you guys have to say. We are here every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Also, make sure you are checking us out on your favorite podcast platform as well as YouTube. You can definitely put more comments on the YouTube page. And we, of course, if you're enjoying the content that you're hearing, we want to make sure that you are also following us on other platforms. So until next Saturday, thank you so much for tuning in and have a blessed week.